This presentation deals with requests using indirect object pronouns, pour c'est la vie. First, you need to know that an indirect object is the to whom or the for whom in a sentence. Look at the first example. Give this message to him. To him tells you who the recipient is of the message. Look to the right. Give him this message. This is basically the same sentence. Him, again, is the indirect object. In the second example, write down this number for me. For me is the indirect object. And then the third, give us more time. Us is the indirect object. We could rephrase that as give more time to us. Again, to us is the indirect object. Here are your indirect objects in English. Me, to me, for me. You, to you, for you. Him, to him, for him. Her, to her, for her. Us, to us, for us. You, to you, for you. Them, to them, for them. And here are their equivalents in Spanish. Me or to me will be me. You or to you, le. To him, le. To her, le. To us, nos. To you guys, les. To them, les. There are affirmative requests and there are negative requests. Let's start with some affirmative requests. Explain the problem to me. Explíqueme el problema. Notice that the indirect object is added to the end of the verb. You're going to add it right on and it will become part of one longer word. Explique, explain, me, to me. Explíqueme el problema. Also note the accent mark in the middle of explique. Look in the second example. Explain the problem to us. The same thing happens. To us is nos, and that gets added to the end of the verb. Explíquenos el problema. Explain the problem to her. Explíquele el problema. Notice that le is added to the end of the verb. With ustedes, if I'm asking a group of you to do these things, and it says, explain the problem to me, notice that the verb ends with an en, expliquen. Then we add the indirect object to that. Explíquenme el problema. Explain the problem to us. Explíquennos el problema. Explain the problem to them. Explíquenles el problema. If the request is negative, it will have not or don't in it. When this happens in Spanish, you cannot put the indirect object stuck on the end of the verb like you could with affirmative requests. Don't explain the problem to me. No me explique el problema. Don't explain the problem to us. No nos explique el problema. Don't explain the problem to them. No les explique el problema. Notice that on each of these, we have to put the indirect object before the verb. Now look at the examples with ustedes, when I'm talking to more than one of you and asking you not to explain the problem to me. Don't explain the problem to me. No me expliquen el problema. Don't explain the problem to us. No nos expliquen el problema. Don't explain the problem to her. No le expliquen el problema. Now you see some ambiguity. You see that le can mean at least three different things. Le can mean to you, le can mean to her, and le can mean to him. Likewise, les can mean more than one thing. Les can mean to you guys or to y'all, and les can mean to them. But don't worry, there is a way to clarify the ambiguity. Imagine that you're in an emergency department in a hospital, and you see that somebody desperately needs an IV. You could say to a nurse, Póngale un suero. Give him or give her an IV. But we're not sure whether you're talking about him or her here. And perhaps there are two patients that came in from an accident scene. So, what you could do is simply clarify who you're talking about. Póngale un suero al señor Gutiérrez. Give Mr. Gutierrez an IV. Note here that you still keep póngale. Notice that you have le on the end of the verb, but also you clarify by putting in al señor Gutierrez. In the second examples, we have negative commands or negative requests. No les dé pastillas. Don't give them any pills. Well, les is not too clear as to whom you're talking about. So we can clarify it. No les dé pastillas a los niños. Don't give the children any pills. Notice that you have les before the verb de, and you have put in a los niños, and now it's clear. In Mexico, they sometimes say, ándale, for goodbye. C'est la vie 2020.